All right, hi friends, Miss D here, and I am going to show you today how we're going to start to assemble our square Flair vase. By now, hopefully you will have your 4 walls and your bottom cut, and it should look something like this, bagged. Let me get it out of here. And your 4 walls and your base look something like this. And you may or may not have already beveled your edges. We talked about that last week. I've done 3 of the 4 walls, and I'm going to remind you how to bevel the edge. If you forget, you'll simply want to use the edge of the table, put your clay wall up against the edge, and you're going to use your fettling knife, and you're going to just very simply, at about a 45-degree angle, shave off a little piece of the edge. So now that you have a 45-degree angle. And of course, 45 degrees and 45 degrees equal 90 degrees. So once you put your 2 walls together, like this, you will have a 90-degree angle, or something very close to a 90-degree angle. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start to assemble our square Flair vase. We are going to do the first 2 walls, and we'll attach those to the base, and then we'll work on walls 3 and 4. I have a variety of tools and things here that are going to help me do this. I have some coils that I already had made, and I had them under some wet paper towel to keep them nice and soft. The softer the coils are, the easier they're going to be to blend. I have a little bit of extra clay in case I need that for anything. I have some slip, which is simply just clay plus water, acts like glue. We're going to want to use a good amount of this to make sure that our walls stay together. I have a wooden modeling tool, which in my opinion tends to be the most effective tool for blending coils into each joint. I've got a fork to help me slip and score. And I have a couple other tools here that I may or may not end up using depending on what I'm feeling. I've got a sponge with some water, help me smooth out the walls. I've got a rib tool. I have a small wooden slot that might help along the way, and sometimes a pencil eraser kind of helps get in the edges. So we're going to start to assemble our walls. The first thing I want to do is get 2 walls together, and we're going to slip and score. So we're simply going to make sure we score the edges. I like to make little X patterns. I feel like it gives me the best surface area. And we know that we're putting these 2 walls together. So we're going to slip and score. We're going to add that slip, and the consistency of this slip should be somewhere in the mix of sort of like a chocolate yogurt. I like to think of yogurt. It's thick enough that it's not super wet, but it's going to do a good job of gluing those walls together. So now we have those 2 walls, and we're simply going to meet them up at the edge. I like to work on the side actually. Meet those walls together and press them together. Always use your hand for leverage on the back side, and this is a place where sometimes these smaller wooden slats end up being a real big help, because you could simply just put those straight up and use it as a guide. So now what I want to do is start to put some of these coils in the joints, and by very simply placing a coil in the joint, you could push it in. And then we use that wooden modeling tool to press half of that coil down and half of that coil up. All right. I'll even leave this little bit here because I'll show you what we could do with that in a second. By running the wooden modeling tool back and forth on its side, you'll start to be able to smooth out those walls. You could even use your sponge here if you want to smooth out those walls. We have the sponge on the stick tool that will also be helpful, and that will help join those walls together. So now on the outside edge, we see that we still have not only this joint here, but also this sort of ugly crack here. So one way that I like to sort of zip those together is by using a fork. I'll kind of run the walls together, it looks ugly for a moment, but once you're able to get a little bit of the slip, kind of run it in there, and even if you have some soft clay, you could always take a little mini coil. Sometimes I'll even roll just a long mini coil to help fill in any gaps. So never a bad idea to kind of throw coil in there. Could use that wooden modeling tool to blend it in, back and forth, and then you are able to fill the cracks, top and bottom. Run these two together, and you have two walls joined. On the top here, similarly, I like to use the fork, run those two walls together, rough it up a little bit, and even use some of that excess coil, or if you don't have any excess coil, simply grab a small piece of coil or of soft clay, and you could simply run it along the top edge and blend it in side by side. What this is going to end up doing is joining those two walls together and have them act like one. So when they start to dry, you will see less cracking and your vase is less likely to fall apart because you are making those two walls one wall. And then of course you could smooth it all out and make it look pretty. But you could see how on the top edge and the bottom edge, we have now joined those walls together and made them look really beautiful. So now what I'm going to show you how to do is use the bottom. Let's get that bottom on because we have our two walls. And what this is going to help us do is make sure that our vase is going to stand up straight by having it at a 90-degree angle. We're going to use the edge of the bottom that you cut from the template. And by lining up each wall at a 90-degree angle, that's going to allow our third and fourth wall to go on and have your vase be even. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm simply going to place this down. I like to always kind of put something up just to protect it. And I'm going to use that slip and score process that we're used to using to combine any two pieces of clay. And I'm going to rough up the edges of both the base as well as the base on your vase that you've just put two walls together on. And again, we're going to use the slip to help us glue it together. I like to think of it like a gingerbread house, and the slip acts like the frosting that you would use to put a gingerbread house together. So we're going to take our vase and we're going to line it up so that we see about the same amount of overhang on each side. So we have just a hair of an overhang, and what that overhang is going to do is allow us to use the clay from the base and pull it up. This is going to help us join those two pieces of clay together and have a nice consistent bottom. The way that I like to do that is the same as we did on the walls, and that's simply using the fork to kind of rough it up and pull some of that base clay up. We're going to do that on both sides. Pull some of that up, and then we'll move to the inside real quick and we'll get this guy on. And just like we did on the walls, we'll want to put a coil in that joint. A coil is going to go in every single joint that's going to attach two walls. And in the same way, we're going to blend up and blend down, blend up, blend down, and then of course you could use the tool to help you smooth it all out, make it look pretty. Use the sponge on a stick, whatever you like. Use your finger to smooth it all out. So now the inside we know is looking good. So now let's go back to that outside edge. And then similarly, we could use the wooden modeling tool. Smooth it out, go back and forth, side to side. Make that look nice and pretty. And then this side, side to side. Make sure it's nice and attached all the way around. So now we have 2 walls attached to a base. So you get the idea about how starting with the 2 walls, attaching the bottom, now we're going to have the opportunity of adding walls 3 and 4 and having them meet up in the edges. And hopefully, if you get your wall 3 on with the right amount of overhang here and wall 4, then you will have a nice 90-degree base. The biggest thing is in each of these joints that you add a little bit of clay, you zip it together, and then you add coils in each of those joints to make your square Flair base.